So about a year ago, I was giving a workshop at a business club. And after I finished, a young lady walked up to me and said, that was an okay presentation, Mark. I'd really like to invite you to see a real world-class speaker. Now, if I had any ego at all, I would have been insulted, but you know what? I'm a sponge. I'd like to go hear a real world-class speaker. So I was invited to my next guest's workshop the following week. So I show up, and I have to tell you, this man was the real deal. He has mastered his craft both in leadership and speaking, but also in entertaining and connecting with an audience. And I learned so much that I bought 3 of his books right on the spot and became a huge fan immediately. And I've been spending the last year trying to get him on my podcast because he travels around the world doing his thing. And I finally got him here. So I'm going to read his bio specifically from one of his book called Innovating Innovation, because it's short and sweet, because it's 2.5 pages otherwise. Dave Morey is the chairman and CEO of DMG Global and vice chairman of Core Strategy Group. He is one of America's leading strategic consultants and one of the nation's most sought-after speaker. He's got best-selling books called The Underdog Advantage, The Leadership Campaign, which is really cool, Creating Business Magic, which is such a unique leadership book. I love that book. He has worked with some of the world's top companies, adding billions of dollars in revenue. God, this goes on, Dave. You'll be able to speak soon. Morey has advised Nobel Peace Prize winner, 19 winning global presidential campaigns, and Fortune 500 CEOs. And he does decathlon, or did decathlon, and he's a magician. Dave, thanks for being on the show.
Mark, I am so happy to be with you. I would have hated me if I were you, because I've seen you speak and you're pretty darn good. Don't you listen to anybody else? We're all sucking up lessons from everyone else, aren't we?
Yeah, no, it was so fun. It's so funny because when she did that, I had hated the presentation I gave so much anyway. I walk off stage every single time. Every time I'm done with a podcast, every time I'm done with whatever it is, I'm like, what the heck was that? So I'm cool, right? Like I'm cool. So I go and I meet you, and I'll tell you the thing that I loved most about that presentation that I saw was not the content, which was really great. Like it was really unique and really pointed. And then your entertainment, you did magic in the middle within your presentation, and you know how to hold an audience. What I really loved was how you connect with people. And for me, for someone who has a resume like yours, right? And I've run into so many people like that, to not speak at an audience, but to be in relationship with an audience was really told me a lot about who you are. Mm-hmm. And that's why I wanted you on my podcast. I only want real people on my podcast who are going to provide some semblance of value.
Well, magic is a hobby gone way out of control. And I fertilize lessons from magic back to the business and leadership world. And I must say, Mark, it's fascinating because you learn so much by doing magic, because it's so unusual to do magic. And one thing you learn in magic is the great magicians, like the one I wrote the magic book with, Eugene Berger, they connect with the audience. They stop and make friends with the audience. They literally finish a sentence looking in someone's eyes in the audience, then move to the next sentence and look at someone else's eyes. And isn't that what we all need to be doing today? Connecting ourselves, like, the strings of our eyes to someone else's eyes. And I've learned that from people smarter than me. I'll tell you, It really is powerful, and it's what we need today.
Yeah, thank you. So, before I turned on the recording, I was telling you, the original reason I wanted you to be on the podcast was to talk about leadership and innovation. And we might get into that in a little bit. But right now, we're in month 4 of the coronavirus shutdown. Or reopening, or whatever we're going to call it. And before the call started, you and I both admitted that, we're supposed to kind of be in stage 3. We started off with the chaos, the adrenaline pushed, what do we do now? Let's figure things out, scramble things. Then we got into the acceptance part where we were figuring out how to work from home, what to do with childcare and all that. And by now we thought we would be opening up to some semblance of a new normal and figure that out. And what you and I agree on is, no, it's all scrambled eggs, and we're still opening, and we're still supposed to go forward. But now we're tired. We have histories. We're, the stress. We're on empty. and I'm sure you're working with people who are also trying to figure out what to do with their businesses, what to do with their personal lives now.
I think that's right. And I salute your work on resiliency and its role in leadership. That's the right word for where we are today, resiliency. We're going to need much more of it. I think you're right. It's like, I don't even think the resets happened. I think it's coming. I know that's probably not something a lot of your audience wants to hear, but
but they're living it. They know, like this isn't something we don't know. We're all just kind of like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, exactly. And you're seeing government's inability to, whatever party you're from, to get this right. So I think, we are all standing guard over our minds. We've got to be the navigators of our routines and rituals, and controlling what we can control, trying to not get too worried about what we can't control. I love Mark Twain once said, when I was a 12-year-old athlete, I used to worry a lot about every basketball game or every track meet or every football game. And I read this quote by Mark Twain, who said, "I've had many worries in my life, none of which have ever come true. I can't promise that, but most of the worries that you have in your life, when you look back on them, they weren't as big as you thought, and they didn't come true." So we've got to stand guard over our minds. And I think it's the time to grow. You got to use this crisis, don't waste this crisis to grow, to get some Renaissance resiliency cooking here, because I think we're going to need it, Mark. I really do.
So where do you start? So, again, 3 months ago, this was an interesting conversation. Okay, I'll read a couple of self-help books. I'll work out, or I'll do this, I'll learn a language. Now we're 3-4 months into it, and we're tired.
Yeah.
And, and I love that phrase, we really got to guard our minds, because,
Yes.
My mind can do a number on me, especially when I'm fatigued and when the allostatic load is just been on high for 4 months. Right. So how do you guide people to guard their minds and to be able to be their best even when the tank's empty?
Well, we have, our company grew up out of politics, and every political campaign I've worked on has been a perpetual crisis. I mean, that's just so I'm drawing on that framework. That's what attracted Jobs to us and brought my partner and I out to meet Jobs and give a speech in the 80s. And Jobs declared us really smart when it comes to insurgent strategy. We didn't even know what he was talking about, but that's our model.
You weren't clear. That's Steve Jobs of Apple.
Yeah, Steve Jobs of Apple. And it was before he was Steve Jobs of Apple, but he was still Steve Jobs of Apple. And he was an insurgent, and he taught us the power of insurgent strategy in times of crisis. It is, I think of today as like a perpetual political campaign, not the presidential crazy campaign going on now, but we are going through hyper change. The quick triple whammy is the worst global health crisis in 100 years, the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, the worst racial unrest in 50 years. I mean, we're a little more than halfway through the year. Right. Put your seatbelt on, and we just don't know where COVID-19 is going. So how do you do it? I have 3 suggestions that I'm trying to put to heart. Stand guard over your mind means you got to turn the TV off sometimes. The loop of anxiety that comes out of media today will not be good for you. And so number 1, everybody should feel a little bit uncomfortable multiple times a week. We're all, I do national broadcast out of this room from a different location, and podcasts, and we do magic shows around the world. We're now TV producers at home, right? I mean,
sure.
You've got to stretch. You've got to get used to new stuff. I mean, you've done these podcasts where you are, I know, before, but so you may have been better prepared, but everybody needs to get out of their comfort zone a little bit. And number 2, build your momentum up now, because we're going to need it for this economy. I really don't think we've reset it yet. I think it's coming. And finally, this is the time to take on some new skills. Read the books you needed to read. Get your Renaissance inner insurgent going. That inner resilient insurgent. You're going to need that guy, that gal, pretty soon.
I balance all that, because I think we still need to do all that you were saying. And as I tell people, they really got to guard their self-care. Yeah. I mean, self-care is the cliches that are true for 100. Like, you need to get your rest. You need to drink your water. You need to stop eating the junk food. That 10 pounds that people put on during COVID, you need to stop that now, because this is the last 0.2 miles of the marathon,
That's
where
right.
it's uphill and you still aren't done.
Yeah, that's right.
So digging deep.
The other metaphor is athletics. You know, you were kind enough to mention I used to be a decathlon competitor. 10 events, 2 days. You would usually screw up one of these bloody events early in the process, and you can't let that get you down psychologically. We're early in the decathlon here. So you really have to keep your mindset strong. That's going to be so, so important. And all the research shows, and I know this is part of what you talk about, the optimists actually produce more in business and in life. You got to find that optimistic part of yourself. And I don't mean to be unrealistic, and I don't mean to drop your guard. Keep wearing your mask, and let's make some common sense behaviors out here. Let's follow some tracks that make some sense. But you got to keep your optimist cooking. You got to find some ways to connect to people like we are now, to use this new medium, to get used to it. People, anytime anybody's ever done their first Zoom show, they lose about 12 pounds. I mean, you're going to go out of your comfort zone when you do stuff, but you're going to have to do that now. This is a new different that we're heading into now, beyond all the cliches. So I think it's a really good time.
I want to stop you right there, because that was a great distinction. This is a new different.
Yeah.
We were talking about 3 months ago was, okay, there's going to be something different. There's going to be change. Now it's just the new different. I love it, is meaning we don't really know what we're going into. So we need to be prepared for almost anything.
Yeah, the triple whammy I mentioned, any single one would have blown the circuit. So put 3 of them together. That's where we are. Not to mention all the other problems in the world and in the country. So, buckle up your seatbelt, find some good strategic sources. Underdog is good, Underdog Advantage, Tony Robbins stuff is good, whoever you think is good, Jack Covey, and read up, get a framework going and start using this time to ramp up, as you would say, your resilient leadership, your ability to get ready for more change. We either let change make us a victim, or we ride the wave of change. And I think we got to get out ahead and ride and lead the wave of change. That's where we are today.
Yeah, when this first started, I was talking about how the uncertainty that was brought on by this is not unlike midlife. Midlife is when, you lose a job, a health issue happens, your relationship, and then all of a sudden you're in this uncertainty, and your air of invincibility is broken. And I think this did the same thing. And that's when I started thinking about your book, Innovating Innovation, and having to really force yourself to evolve. And you consult with leaders and with entire organizations about innovating. How can we take some of those principles now and learn how to really innovate ourselves so that we're more marketable and expand our range as we come out of this?
Well, the book is inspired by the quote 57 years ago by Peter Drucker, who said all business comes down to 2 things: marketing and innovation, in that order, by the way. And I think you could say that's a little true of life: marketing and innovation. In other words, you've got to present yourself and communicate. That's never been more important. You've got to make the case for yourself. That's something we got to teach our kids and our grandchildren. And number 2, you got to innovate. You've got to grow. You've got to keep changing your own paradigms. And people that stop growing in this crisis are not going to be happy. You got to use this crisis, put it to work for you where you can. And so the book, gives you, a couple ideas. One, it talks about Einstein versus Edison. Einstein was too smart. I mean, we can be inspired by Einstein, but we can't imitate him. He was like Mozart. We need to be Beethoven, who would go through the struggle and cross out words and went through 25 drafts. Mozart would get the first draft right. And we got to be like Edison, who was plenty smart, but Edison was constantly prototyping, which is my favorite word today for business and for people. Prototype, build some small experiments, see if you like where it's going, and see if you can and are able and are rewarded for scaling it up.
So in other words, don't completely change your job. Small bets, start a side hustle,
Absolutely. And then find, you know, the innovation and the creativity tends to be not inside big organizations, but out in the creative periphery. So go find artists, go find inspiration, go find people that are out not in the center of any bureaucracy or any organization. Go find the best. One thing, I mean, I have learned, and maybe I have no idea how I figured this out, Mark, and I don't know if you found this. If you hang around with geniuses, you sound a lot smarter yourself. So I found this pattern as I look back on life. In anything I do, I try and get to the best person and learn from them, and then absorb it. And it's worked in business. It's worked in every aspect. You know, learning magic, I work with the best teacher in the world. How could I not get better? I'd have to be an idiot not to get better. So I think you've got to find this creative inspiration, this creative innovation out in the universe. The internet allows us to go find that today. You don't have to be a victim of your own status quo. You can reach out and get outside yourself.
Who's inspiring you in this vacuum of leadership that we're experiencing today?
I mean, I like Tony Robbins stuff because I think it's very smart. And you talk about, he is a good speaker. He's done his 10,000 hours. And so I think he's good. It's always a combination of people. Stephen Covey, I think I said Jack Covey before. Stephen Covey.
I figured that was Stephen Covey, Jack Canfield just mashed together.
That's exactly what it was. You know, both Covey and Canfield, and you'll be fine. Stephen Covey and Jack Canfield. Apologies to both of them. And I think that, you know, this is the time to dip into your novels. This is the time to catch up on your reading. This is the time to jump in. You know, you've written a lot about, I'll give you one example of a book that everyone should get today. You talk about this in your work, I know, Mark, Getting Things Done. I think it's David Allen's book. How do you get control of your emails? How do you actually get control of all these thousands of things coming at you? Isn't it interesting, even though we're all quarantined, self-quarantined, a little bit off the radar, we're still inundated with stuff to do, invitations.
I've never been busier in all my life.
Yeah, exactly. So the Allen book talks about how to manage that stuff and reduce the stress. And it is fascinating, I must say. If you know, just the way to manage emails today. Again, you can't be. Here's a specific example, and I bet you're going to agree with me because you're an expert on this stuff. The last thing you want to do is get to your emails like early in the day, first thing in the day, constantly doing nothing but returning emails, because generally the people emailing you want something from you. And they will take you off your own ideological agenda. So instead of reading War and Peace or The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People or Malcolm Gladwell's new book, which I'm a fan of, back to answer to previous question. Instead of doing that, you start dealing with these dumb emails. And this gives you an ideological way of keeping that day pure. You dip in and out of those emails, you delegate, you delete, you defer. And just by doing that, you get a hold of emails, which are just inundating us if we don't do. You need a system. You know, McDonald's has a system. How can McDonald's handle so many customers worldwide when we're not in COVID-19 without systems? You need a system to manage your lives today. The David Allen book is great.
Yeah, David Allen's a dirty. I asked you your opinion. David Allen's a dirty word on my podcast because in the front of Only Tens, it said, "This is the anti-getting things done book." I did David Allen's program twice, and it absolutely destroyed me because I have ADD. So I have these perfect folders with these great labels, and I have every tool that he ever has, and I can't do it for more than a week. And I finally figured out that I can only do the things that only tens, right? I can't keep track of those thousands of things that are coming in. Right. Anything that's a 10, I take care of. Anything that's not a 10 either gets delegated or just goes away. And if it wants to be a 10, it'll come back.
Well, that's fascinating. And now that I think of it, I didn't do any of his programs. I read his book and I personalized the lesson. I figured out a way to make it work for me, which sounds like you might have even done that.
The thing I stole with it from him was the lists. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But I just couldn't. I started capturing everything. Right. Yeah. And so for me with ADD, everything screams at me at the same level. So
Yeah.
I can only see the things I need to do that day. I can only see one, two, or three things. Otherwise, I gets lost. And now it's so bad with the COVID thing. I actually, 3 times a week, I have a person in my mastermind who we get on Zoom and we turn on Zoom for 2 hours. We state what we're going to do and we do our deep work while we're on Zoom with each
That's
other
brilliant.
on mute. And
Yeah.
we have gotten so much done. And she finished her book. I'm writing 3 books. It's amazing.
The other thing that I'm finding, Mark, and I think your listeners and viewers, if they're viewing, will find, we have to trick ourselves into momentum.
Totally.
Momentum is the genius that we have all inside of us. It's getting that energy. It's like the rocket ship. The momentum is required to get it through the atmosphere. Once it gets beyond the solar system, it can go to 25 other solar systems once it has its momentum. So I think finding ways to trick yourself into getting momentum, for me, it's do the doable, get easy stuff done. And then, oh my God, that wasn't that hard. You have this.
Nice. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's a very powerful principle.
It isn't the run. It's getting your sneakers on that's hard.
Exactly. Yeah, in magic terms, it's having everything laid out so you just walk in and you do your practice session and you leave. So if it's a ritual and if it's a way to trick yourself, it's also getting 3 easy things done in the morning. And to give you that momentum. Don't finish the War and Peace novel as the first to do and get stuck there. Get some easy things done to build that momentum. Then you can tackle the harder.
Go back to that magic metaphor you did. So when you're going into a practice session, you said have everything laid out so you walk into a practice session. Tell me about that. That's really fascinating.
I used to be an athlete, as you kindly mentioned, and I borrow a lot of those lessons in the way, I suppose you could call it midlife magic. A lot of people were magicians as kids or were fascinated with magic, and they come back to it somewhere in their midlife, which is a great rebirth, by the way. And that's, my friend runs the best magic school in the world, and he's Penn and Teller and David Copperfield's teacher. So he's also my teacher. So he finds people coming back in midlife to take magic classes. And what you find when you get back into magic, which I did as a kid, and then I left off for 25 years and came back to it, you need to keep practicing, because repetition creates the skill and the genius that we need to draw upon, that we all have inside of us. And it's like the setup is the hardest. It's like, as you say, get the sneakers right next to your bed, because you're 10 times more likely to do that run if they're there than if you have to go find your sneakers. And the magic props have to be ready. So you go in your session, you go out. One trick is you come in, you practice for a minute or two, you come out, and you do that 100 times rather than spend 100 hours working on it in repetition and continuous form. You come in and out. So it's the consistency that teaches you.
Tell me how that translates to you running your business.
Well, I mean, the rituals of business are important. And if you're not good at rituals, hire someone who is. Hire your weakness. I'm not, even though I went to a fancy business school, I don't particularly enjoy accounting. I got pretty good accountants, and I'm pretty good at some aspects of accounting, like strategic accounting. I think that's a fake thing that I'm making up, but in my mind, it exists. And so I'm good at figuring out how to aim them, leverage them, even help them, but don't look at me to do that. So sometimes you may have to, defer that or delegate that. But in business, you do have to have, you have to have the rituals of checking in with your team. Right now is the time to mega communicate with people more than you did previously. This is an imperfect medium we're on right now, but it's what we got for the short term. I think I'm about, knock on wood, to sign up a new gigantic client, which I have never met. This is the first one we've done. We have a bunch of really big corporate clients, so we're lucky, and they all need help right now. I suppose that's good, but it's like online dating. Like we've never met. Like we're that's kind of hard to. If I met you, so I can have this conversation with you, it would have been a whole different thing if we hadn't met in person.
Yeah, I have a couple of new clients that signed up during COVID that I've never met in person, and usually I fly or go wherever they are. We have a chemistry meeting, we get started, and then the Zoom is different, right? But yeah, there's people I've never met in person.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a whole different thing, but we have to get used to that. And I do think also 30% isn't coming back. And it's usually kind of the junk that we didn't need to do or the companies didn't need to do. But how do you find that 30%? I do think there will be a redefinition of travel, of virtual, some combination hybrid of virtual and real. Obviously, real life's not going away once it's safe. But I don't know how you feel. I mean, my crystal ball tells me we got a long way here. If you look at colleges now, and I love how sports is our lead indicator, right? When the NBA cancels its season, everyone goes, "Oh, this is serious." A couple months ago, I mean,
Sean Doolittle, our pitcher for our wonderful Washington Nationals, said sports is a gift for our functioning society.
that's right.
Right? And we don't have a functioning society yet.
We don't have one right now. But look at college football. I mean, a lot of schools have canceled the programs. I mean, this thing is, we're going to have a long reset here. And it's going to take, your word that I love so much is resiliency. It's going to take a lot of that.
Yeah, when I joked that, if you wanted to know which character you were in The Walking Dead, COVID was going to do it for you. And I thought it was more of a joke. And now I'm like, no, this really is like, who are you going to be when it gets really tough on you? Because it's getting tough on a lot of us.
That's right.
And you find out what you're made of. What would you have done? When you look at history, what would I have done if I was in World War II and I lived in Europe? What would I have done if I was during the Great Depression? What would I have done if I was in the zombie apocalypse? And now is the time to find out who you actually turn out to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Or who you want to create yourself to be. Because for me, it was really tough when COVID first hit. I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do for people? I really wasn't sure. And one of my clients actually called me and said, you need to be on Facebook every single day on live. People need what you have to give.
Yeah.
I was like, really? And then I realized my whole life was chaos. I was homeless, right? I was a drug addict. I was an alcoholic. I was born to be in the foxhole, right?
Okay.
I love chaos. So that's when I, every day at noon for 60 days, I did a live, and it was a really interesting reinvention there. So if I can do something like that, anybody can do that.
Well, and you're drawing on that experience. We all have examples of chaos in our lives. Just remember, that's a great point. Go back to a time when you had your own crisis and start acting that way again. Because we all have that resource, that we've been tested really hard, and your immunity system builds up, and you learn lessons from that test, that series of tests. So I think you drawing on it and read your books, go to your podcasts. I mean, this is the time you should be feeding your mind and growing that resiliency antibody. I'm going to call it an antibody because it may be, we have that today as opposed to the vaccine for COVID-19.
Yeah, you're right.
Right. So
when we have a vaccine, that's great. Right now we got this.
That's right. That's the vaccine that you can get right now and that it works. And there'll be another one down the line, but this is the one that we need right now.
Awesome. So what's keeping you busy these days? I know being a dad is all consuming, but what are people keeping you busy with?
Well, we have a 15-month-old, so she is endless entertainment. You can imagine my wife and me. We're holed up in our river house in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. So I think without magic, the other point I'd make is find a hobby, find a cross-fertilization that you can bring into business, leadership, life. Find something you love doing and pull that in. I take all my lessons. I work on magic almost every day with, once a month with my teacher. We do monthly shows. But we're doing, the big thing we're doing is we're starting to get into what we call change leadership workshops and training. I hate to call it training, but I think that people are going to need frameworks coming through COVID-19. They're going to need proven strategies to get through this thing. And I've never been a big fan of training before. To me, training tends to tell you how to follow and not to lead. And I think we need leadership training today more than ever. I do think we've got a bit of a deficit in terms of leadership, even change leadership, certainly in politics, but even in parts of our world. So we've got to, that's something America has in its genes, and we've got to, I think, strengthen that piece of our DNA that already exists. So we're working on that. It'll obviously be, it's based on all our books. It'll be obviously virtual, but I'm looking forward to this because I think people are hungry for these frameworks. And by the way, another piece of this is the insurgent model. We just, this is how funny, as you get older, you find these patterns. Most of our famous clients kind of broke the rules. They never went to jail. They never completely broke the rules, but they didn't do the standard, middle manager, midlife, 3 steps up, 2 to the left, 1 to the right. You could possibly be CEO 22 years from now. They went out and they were breaking rules. They were thinking different, in the words of Steve Jobs, think different. They were finding an insurgent, differentiated approach to the challenges they face. And really, leadership today is about solving problems. We got plenty of problems out there to solve. So we're trying to help in that vein, prepare people more for these changed leadership challenges.
Where can people find out about that program?
We'll have more announcements at playoffense.com. You remember the website, because
I'll put all that in the show notes, because so that people can get in touch with you, they can follow you, they can find all your books, because your books are not only insightful, they're entertaining and well written, and I really appreciate
that boils down our philosophy. We found, and the research shows, that the best leaders in anything play a little more offense. Michael Jordan, I don't know if you are a sports fan, I think you are. The ESPN documentary's coming out, or I think it's on Netflix now. He played more offense. He didn't just have more talent. And most people find it's 30% more offense. It's not 90%. It's a little more offense each day. So I think play offense is part of what we got to be doing here. Playing defense means you're sitting here trying to survive.
Right.
I think you got to play offense right now.
I love it when my clients finally figure out, with every one of my clients, I build what's called a world domination plan. Like, what are we going to go out and create, right? And I love when they get the epiphany and they go, you know what? I've been playing not to lose. I haven't been playing to win.
Yeah.
And when that bulb goes off, now they're ready to take off. And it's really, it's such a great analogy. I really appreciate it. The other thing with Michael Jordan I love, and it's going to be in the new book, is the 3 stages of his career.
Yeah.
He wasn't the same player as he got older, as the game changed, as it asked different things of him, not unlike what's going on with us.
And he was cut from his junior high basketball team. Hey, can we all relate to that?
Right?
Yeah, failure turns into success. I think that's resiliency right there. Absolutely. It's like for your clients, Mark, if you play prevent defense, you probably start losing the game. You got to go on the attack. Look at it from investment perspective. If you panicked 2 months ago and you sold all your stocks, that's not good. You're going to have to find strategies and tools to keep playing offense, to keep pushing forward, and a little more offense each day. That's maybe the most important thing we can all be taking to heart here. Nice.
Dave, I really appreciate you sharing the wisdom and the experience that you bring to the table. I want people to go to, I'm going to put all of David's contact information in the show notes. Any workshop that he offers and that you can take, I think you're going to learn a lot. I'm going to put all his books in the show notes so that you can learn. They're really good reads. When you look at the summaries, you're going to know which one's for you, because they're so descriptive. So you're going to go off and play with your kid now, or do you have work to do?
Yeah, I got both. And thank you for what you're doing for the world, because you're bringing leadership principles out there when they need it most. And especially around this word, you embody resiliency. So that's a great thing that you're bringing to the world. We need Mark Silvermans today.
Thank you. That's why I have a giant Phoenix tattoo that goes all resiliency after 50, man. I'm turning 58 next week, and it's resilience is
58 is the new. That's the new 38. You're good. You're good.
That's what I hear. So, Dave, thank you again. I would love to have you come back again after we hit some sort of new normal. I'd love to just have a conversation specifically about leadership and innovation and all the cool things that you're talking about.
Let's do it. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you for being here. To everybody else, again, all that we're talking about, we're going to have to dig deep. Please remember to put the oxygen mask on yourself. Take care of yourself. The only way you're going to be able to do any of these things is to fill the tank. If you liked our show, please share it. Please tell people about us. Give us a rating. I love you. Have a great rest of the day.